A casino floor manager just broke their silence about something the industry has been hiding for years. 7 specific slot machines that used to give players a fighting chance have been secretly reprogrammed to drain bankrolls faster than ever before. What these insiders are revealing could save you thousands of dollars the next time you walk into a casino. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which machines have been tightened, how casinos did it without anyone noticing, and why they targeted these specific games. The gambling industry is furious that this information is getting out, but players deserve to know the truth. Buffalo Gold by Aristocrat used to be one of the fairest games on any casino floor. When it first launched, the RTP was consistently configured at 94 to 96%, which gave players a legitimate chance to walk away winners. The free spins bonus triggered regularly, and when it hit, it paid substantial amounts. But something changed about 3 years ago. Multiple floor managers from different casinos across the country report that corporate offices sent down new programming chips for Buffalo Gold machines. The official reason given was a software update to fix minor bugs. But that wasn't the whole story. The new chips allowed casinos to adjust the RTP settings much lower than before. What was once locked at 94 to 96% could now be dropped to as low as 85%. And most casinos took full advantage of this new flexibility. Within months, Buffalo Gold machines across the country were secretly running at these reduced payout rates. Players noticed something was wrong, but they couldn't quite put their finger on it. The game looked the same, sounded the same, and the bonus still triggered. But the wins got smaller and the losing streaks got longer. One floor supervisor reported that customer complaints about Buffalo Gold increased by 40% in the 6 months following the update, but management dismissed them as normal variants. Here's what makes the Buffalo Gold tightening particularly deceptive. The game's math model was altered so that the free spins bonus still triggers at roughly the same frequency as before. You might get the bonus once every 120 to 150 spins, which feels about right to players who remember the old version. But the bonus payouts were significantly reduced. Where you used to regularly win 100 to 300 times your bet during free spins, now you're lucky to see 50 to 150 times your bet. A pit boss from a major Las Vegas property shared a troubling story. There was a regular player named Tom who had been coming to play Buffalo Gold twice a week for nearly 4 years. He knew the game inside and out and had developed a consistent playing strategy. After the update, Tom kept playing his usual sessions but started losing much more consistently. Over the course of 8 months following the update, Tom lost approximately $18,000 more than he would have statistically lost on the old version of the game. He eventually stopped coming to the casino altogether. When the pit boss ran into him months later and asked why he'd stopped visiting, Tom said he just felt like his luck had changed and the game wasn't fun anymore. He had no idea the machine itself had been altered. The Buffalo Gold situation reveals a broader trend in the casino industry. When a game becomes extremely popular, casinos eventually tighten it because they know players are attracted to the brand and theme regardless of the math. Players who loved Buffalo Gold kept playing it even after the RTP dropped because the experience felt familiar and comfortable. They blamed their increased losses on bad luck, rather than questioning whether the machine had been changed. What really bothers industry insiders about the Buffalo Gold tightening is how calculated it was. The changes were subtle enough that most players couldn't definitively say the game was different, but significant enough to dramatically increase casino profits. It's a perfect example of how casinos can manipulate machines in ways that are technically legal but ethically questionable. Wheel of Fortune has been a casino staple for decades. and the triple extreme spin version was one of the most popular iterations. When it first hit casino floors, the game was known for its generous bonus rounds and the iconic wheel spin feature that could award massive multipliers. About 2 years ago, IGT released what they called an enhanced version of the game. Casinos were told this new version had better graphics, smoother gameplay, and improved bonus features. What they weren't told up front was that the default RTP settings had been significantly reduced. Multiple casino managers report that the original triple extreme spin ran at 92 to 94% RTP in most properties. The enhanced version's default setting was 88 to 90%. That's a 4 to 6 percentage point drop, which translates to massive profit increases for casinos over time. But here's where it gets really sneaky. The enhanced version was designed to trigger the wheel spin bonus slightly more frequently than the original. Players would notice they were hitting the bonus more often and assume the machine was paying better. But the wheel itself had been reweighted to land on lower multipliers much more frequently. In the original version, when you triggered the wheel bonus, you had a decent chance of hitting a 10x or even 20x multiplier. In the enhanced version, the wheel was programmed to land on 2x and 3x multipliers about 70% of the time. The big multipliers still existed on the wheel, so players could see them right there during every spin, but the odds of actually landing on them had been drastically reduced. A slots director from a tribal casino in the Midwest described watching players transition from the old machines to the new ones. For the first few weeks, players seemed happy because they were triggering bonuses frequently. But after a month or two, regular players started commenting that they felt like they weren't winning as much overall, despite getting bonuses. One woman who played Wheel of Fortune religiously every Tuesday and Thursday tracked her results meticulously in a notebook. She brought her notebook to the slots director and showed him the data. In the 6 months before the enhanced version was installed, she'd averaged losses of about $150 per session. In the 6 months after, her average loss per session had increased to $280, even though she was playing the exact same amount of time at the same bet levels. The slots director knew exactly why her losses had increased, but corporate policy prevented him from explaining what had happened. He was instructed to tell players that variance is normal and that short-term results don't reflect long-term odds. But he knew the truth. The machine had been deliberately tightened, and this woman was experiencing the mathematical consequences. What makes the Wheel of Fortune situation particularly frustrating for players is that the game's brand recognition is so strong that people keep playing it regardless of the payout rate. The wheel itself is iconic, and the excitement of watching it spin creates a gambling experience that players crave even when the math has turned against them. Industry insiders report that Wheel of Fortune Triple Extreme Spin is now one of the most profitable games on many casino floors, not because it's more popular than it used to be, but because the RTP was quietly lowered while maintaining the appearance and feel of the original game. Players are literally paying more for the same experience they used to get cheaper. Lightning Link by Aristocrat was a revolutionary game when it first appeared. The hold and respin mechanic was fresh and exciting, and the math model was surprisingly player-friendly for such an innovative feature. The game quickly became a massive hit, with banks of Lightning Link machines appearing in virtually every casino in America. But success breeds exploitation in the casino industry. As Lightning Link's popularity exploded, Aristocrat quietly released updated versions with more aggressive math models. Casino managers across multiple states report that they were offered new Lightning Link configurations with lower RTP settings, and most casinos jumped at the opportunity. The original Lightning Link machines typically ran at 90 to 92% RTP. The newer configurations can be set as low as 86%. That's a 6 percentage point swing, which is absolutely massive in terms of expected player losses over time. Here's how the tightening works. The hold and respin feature still triggers at roughly the same frequency it always did. You still need 6 or more coin symbols to start the feature, and that still happens approximately once every 100 to 120 spins. So to casual players, the game feels the same. But the coin values and the frequency of additional coins during the respin feature were both reduced. In the original version, when you triggered the feature, you had a realistic chance of filling a significant portion of the screen with coins, especially if you started with a good initial trigger of 8 or 9 symbols. In the tightened version, you're much more likely to start with exactly 6 symbols and then fail to land any additional ones during your 3 respins. A casino operations manager from Atlantic City provided detailed data on this phenomenon. His property has both old and new Lightning Link machines on the floor. Over a 3-month period, he tracked the performance of both versions. The old machines were producing an average of $20,400 per day in revenue for the casino. The new machines were producing $3,800 per day. Same game, same themes, same bet limits, but a 58% increase in daily revenue because of the tightened math. The scary part is that players couldn't tell the difference. Both sets of machines had roughly the same amount of play and the same number of players. People weren't avoiding the tight machines because they had no way of knowing which machines were which. The games looked identical, and the bonus triggered at similar rates. Only the payouts had changed, and that's something most players don't track carefully enough to notice. One regular player at that Atlantic City property had been playing Lightning Link for years. He had a regular session routine: show up on Friday evening, play for 3 to 4 hours, and budget $500 for the night. Under the old math, he would usually leave having lost between $150 and $300, which he considered acceptable entertainment cost. After the property swapped out some of the old machines for new tight ones, this player happened to start playing the tightened version. Over the next 2 months, his $500 budget started running out much faster. He'd be out of money in 2 hours instead of lasting 3 to 4 hours. He assumed he was just running bad and kept coming back. After 3 months of playing the tight machine, he'd lost an additional $2,200. Beyond what he would have statistically lost on the old version. He eventually reduced his visits from weekly to monthly because his bankroll couldn't sustain the increased losses, but he never knew the machine itself had been changed. Casino insiders report that Lightning Link's tightening is particularly egregious because the game had already been extremely profitable for casinos at the original RTP. The hold and respin mechanic is inherently engaging, and players were already losing plenty of money. The decision to tighten it further was pure greed, driven by the knowledge that the game's popularity would keep players coming back regardless of how much the math had been skewed against them. Dragon Link is Lightning Link's sister game, also made by Aristocrat, and it suffered the same fate. In fact, some casino managers report that Dragon Link was tightened even more aggressively than Lightning Link because the Asian-themed version attracted high-rolling players who bet larger amounts per spin. When Dragon Link first launched, it ran at similar RTP levels to Lightning Link, around 90 to 92%. But as the game proved incredibly popular with Asian casino customers, Aristocrat introduced lower RTP configurations, and casinos quickly adopted them. A slots manager from a California property with a large Asian customer base explained that Dragon Link machines at his casino were reconfigured about 18 months ago. The RTP dropped from 91% to 87%. That 4 percentage point difference might not sound like much, but on a machine where players regularly bet $5 to $10 per spin, it translates to massive losses very quickly. The tightening of Dragon Link was particularly devastating to high-frequency players. The hold and respin feature still triggers regularly, but the payouts during the feature were significantly reduced. The grand jackpot and major jackpot became much harder to hit, while the mini jackpot remained easy to trigger, but basically worthless. In the original version, triggering the hold and respin feature felt exciting because you had a legitimate shot at a substantial payout. Maybe you wouldn't fill the screen, but you could reasonably expect to win 50 to 100 times your bet fairly often. In the tightened version, most features pay 15 to 30 times your bet, which doesn't even cover the cost of the spins it took to trigger the feature. One high roller at a Las Vegas casino played Dragon Link almost exclusively for over 2 years. He typically bet $10 per spin and would play 8 to 12-hour sessions multiple times per week. This player had been tracked since before the tightening, so casino management had detailed records of his play. Before the RTP reduction, this player was losing an average of $8,000 to $12,000 per month. Those are huge losses, but he was a wealthy individual who viewed it as an entertainment expense. After the machines were tightened, his monthly losses jumped to $18,000 to $24,000. Over the course of a year following the tightening, he lost an additional $90,000 beyond what he would have lost on the original math. Eventually, this player's bankroll couldn't sustain the losses, and he reduced his play significantly. The casino lost a premium customer, not because he wanted to stop gambling, but because the machine had been made so tight that even his substantial bankroll couldn't withstand the increased drain. What troubles industry insiders about Dragon Link is how the tightening disproportionately affected loyal, high-value customers. These were players who loved the game and played it religiously. They weren't casual tourists playing for 20 minutes. They were dedicated customers who generated massive revenue for casinos. And the decision to tighten the machines effectively drove many of them away or forced them to reduce their play. The Dragon Link tightening also reveals how casinos think about customer value. Rather than maintain fair game mathematics to keep high-value players happy and engaged long-term, many properties chose short-term profit maximization. They squeezed these players harder, made more money in the immediate term, but ultimately damaged long-term customer relationships. Game of Thrones Slots by Aristocrat capitalized on the massive popularity of the HBO series. When the machines first appeared around 2015, they were configured relatively fairly. The base game RTP was around 92 to 94%, and the multiple bonus features offered genuine variety and decent payout potential. But as the TV show's popularity peaked and then began to decline, casinos made a calculated decision. They knew that die-hard Game of Thrones fans would seek out these machines regardless of the payout rate, so they tightened them significantly. Multiple floor supervisors report that Game of Thrones machines were reconfigured starting around 2017 and continuing through 2019. The RTP was gradually lowered to as low as 87% in some properties. The changes were implemented slowly over time, which made them even harder for players to notice. The Game of Thrones tightening was particularly sneaky because the game has 4 different bonus features, each themed around one of the 4 major houses from the show: Baratheon, Lannister, Stark, and Targaryen. When you trigger a bonus, the game randomly selects which house feature you'll play. In the original version, all 4 features had roughly similar expected values. Whichever one you got, you could expect a decent payout. In the tightened version, the features were re-weighted so that the worst-paying features trigger much more frequently. The Baratheon feature, which typically pays the least, now triggers about 60% of the time. The Targaryen feature, which has the highest payout potential, now triggers less than 10% of the time. This creates a psychological trap. Players trigger bonuses regularly enough to stay engaged. But most of the bonuses they get are the low-paying variety. They keep playing, hoping to get lucky and trigger the good feature, but the odds are heavily stacked against them. A casino host at a tribal property in the Southwest described a regular player who was obsessed with Game of Thrones, both the show and the slot machine. This player would visit the casino twice a week and play Game of Thrones for 4 to 6 hours per session. Over the course of 2 years spanning the period before and after the tightening, this player's average loss per session increased from about $300 to nearly $600. She didn't change her betting patterns or the length of her sessions. The only variable that changed was the machine's RTP. By the time the show's final season aired in 2019, this player had lost approximately $35,000 more than she would have lost if the machine had maintained its original RTP. She eventually stopped playing after the show ended, not because she'd figured out the machine was tightened, but because her emotional connection to the theme had faded along with her interest in the series. Casino managers report that Game of Thrones represents a pattern they see with many licensed, branded games. The machines start out with decent math to build a player base and capitalize on the brand's popularity. But once the brand's cultural moment passes, casinos tighten the machines to extract maximum value from the remaining dedicated fans before eventually removing the games from the floor entirely. What makes this particularly unethical is that casinos are essentially exploiting brand loyalty. The players who stick with Game of Thrones machines after the show ended are the most dedicated fans. They have an emotional attachment to the theme, and casinos took advantage of that emotional attachment by making the games worse, while knowing these players would keep coming back because of their love for the brand. The Wizard of Oz slot machines by WMS Gaming are some of the most recognizable games on any casino floor. The Ruby Slippers version, with its distinctive red shoes and iconic movie theme, has been a player favorite for years. But this beloved game has been tightened so significantly that it's now one of the worst-paying machines in most casinos. When Wizard of Oz machines first appeared, they typically ran at 91 to 93% RTP. The game had multiple features, including the Glinda feature, the Emerald City free spins, and the Road to Emerald City pick bonus. The features triggered regularly and paid decently, making it a fair game despite the licensing fees built into the math. But Scientific Games, which acquired WMS, introduced new versions of Wizard of Oz with much lower RTP configurations. Casino managers across the country report that current Wizard of Oz machines often run at 85 to 88% RTP, which is a shocking reduction from the original versions. The tightening of Wizard of Oz was done in a particularly deceptive way. The visual appearance of the game remained identical, and the various features still triggered at similar frequencies. But the payouts during those features were drastically reduced. The Emerald City free spins, which used to reliably pay 80 to 200 times your bet, now typically pay 25 to 60 times your bet. The Road to Emerald City pick bonus, which could award substantial credit prizes or big multipliers, now gives smaller rewards much more consistently. A slots director at a regional casino in the Midwest tracked the performance of Wizard of Oz machines over a 5-year period spanning the transition from old to new versions. The old machines generated about $1,800 per day in revenue. The new type machines generate $3,200 per day. That's a 78% increase in daily revenue from the same game with the same player traffic. One particularly heartbreaking case involved an elderly woman who loved the Wizard of Oz movie since childhood. She would visit her local casino 3 to 4 times per week, specifically to play the Wizard of Oz slot machine. She always bet the same amount, played for roughly the same duration, and had been doing this for nearly 6 years. A pit supervisor who knew this woman had watched her play for years. Before the machine was swapped for the tight version, she would typically play for 2 to 3 hours on a $200 budget, and she seemed to understand that she'd usually lose most or all of that money. She viewed it as entertainment cost and was happy with the experience. After the tight version was installed, her $200 started disappearing much faster. She'd be out of money in 45 minutes to an hour. She started bringing more money to extend her playing time. Over the course of 18 months after the changeover, she lost approximately $14,000 more than she would have lost on the original version. The pit supervisor said the saddest part was watching this woman's enthusiasm for the game gradually diminish. She went from smiling and singing along with the music to looking stressed and frustrated. She eventually reduced her visits from 3 to 4 times per week down to once every couple of weeks, and then she stopped coming entirely. The casino had effectively driven away a loyal customer by making her favorite game predatory. Industry insiders report that the Wizard of Oz tightening is particularly troubling because the game attracts older players who have nostalgic attachments to the movie. These are often people on fixed incomes who budget carefully for their casino entertainment. By dramatically increasing the house edge, casinos are taking advantage of elderly players' nostalgia and potentially causing them real financial harm. The Wizard of Oz situation also highlights how licensed brands can be used as cover for predatory math. Players assume that a game based on a beloved, family-friendly movie must be relatively harmless. They don't expect that the cheerful theme and familiar characters are being used to disguise some of the worst odds on the casino floor. Megabucks by IGT is the most famous progressive jackpot slot machine in the world. It's the game that creates millionaires and generates news headlines when someone hits the massive jackpot. But what most players don't know is that Megabucks has been systematically tightened over the past decade, and it's now one of the worst bets in any casino. When Megabucks first achieved fame back in the 1990s and early 2000s, the base game RTP was around 87 to 89%. That's not great, but it was acceptable given the multi-million-dollar progressive jackpot. Players understood they were paying a premium for a chance at life-changing money. But over the years, IGT has quietly reduced the base game RTP on Megabucks machines. Multiple casino managers report that current Megabucks machines run at 83 to 86% RTP. That means the casino is keeping 14 to 17 cents of every dollar played. It's absolutely brutal. The tightening of Megabucks is particularly insidious because it's been done gradually over many years. IGT would release software updates claiming they were fixing bugs or improving performance, but buried in those updates were changes to the pay table and bonus frequencies that reduced player returns. What makes this especially predatory is that the Megabucks jackpot itself has also been made harder to hit. The odds of winning the top prize have been increased significantly. When Megabucks first launched, the odds of hitting the jackpot were approximately 1 in 50 million. Current estimates put the odds closer to 1 in 65 to 70 million. So players are not only losing money faster on the base game, but their already microscopic chance of hitting the jackpot has been made even smaller. They're literally paying more for worse odds. A casino executive who worked for a major Las Vegas property for over 20 years described watching the Megabucks transformation. In the early 2000s, he saw the Megabucks jackpot hit maybe 3 to 4 times per year across all the linked machines in Nevada. In recent years, it hits maybe once or twice per year, despite there being more Megabucks machines in operation than ever before. The reduced hit frequency means the jackpot grows larger, which attracts more players, which means casinos make even more money on the terrible base game math. It's a vicious cycle that benefits only the casino and the machine manufacturer. One case study involves a man who decided he was going to be dedicated to hitting Megabucks. He calculated that if he played regularly enough over a long enough period, probability would eventually work in his favor. He committed to playing Megabucks for at least 2 hours every single week. He maintained this routine for 7 years. Based on his betting patterns and playing frequency, casino player tracking data showed he put approximately $340,000 through Megabucks machines during that time. The base game paid him back about $285,000. He lost $55,000 and never came close to hitting the big jackpot. After 7 years, he finally accepted that he was never going to win and stopped playing. 3 months later, someone hit the Megabucks jackpot at a different casino in Las Vegas. The winner was a tourist who had been in town for 1 day and decided to put $20 into a Megabucks machine. They hit the jackpot on their 8th spin. This perfectly encapsulates the Megabucks trap. Dedicated players can pour hundreds of thousands of dollars into the machine over years and never hit. Meanwhile, a random tourist can win on a whim. The math is so heavily weighted toward the casino that even extraordinary dedication and patience won't overcome the odds. Casino insiders specifically warn against Megabucks not only because the RTP is terrible and the jackpot odds are astronomical, but because the game preys on people's dreams. The marketing around Megabucks emphasizes life-changing wins and millionaire success stories, but they never mention that you're statistically more likely to be struck by lightning multiple times than to hit the Megabucks jackpot. The tightening of Megabucks represents everything wrong with modern slot machine design. Take an already unfavorable game, make it worse over time, and use jackpot marketing to keep players feeding money into a machine that will almost certainly never pay them anything close to what they've lost. So now you know all 7 machines that have been secretly tightened by casinos. But the real lesson here isn't just about these specific games. It's about understanding how the entire industry operates. Casinos have the ability to change slot machine mathematics whenever they want, and players have almost no way of knowing when it happens. The games look the same, sound the same, and feel the same, but the underlying math can be completely different. Every insider who came forward emphasized the same point. Casinos will always prioritize profits over player experience. When a game becomes popular, the first instinct is to figure out how to make it more profitable, which means making it worse for players. The most important thing you can do is set strict limits for yourself and stick to them. Never chase losses. Never assume a machine owes you a win because you've played it for a long time. And remember that even your favorite game, the one you've played for years, might have been tightened without you realizing it. Subscribe for more insider casino information they don't want you to know.